The vote had already passed when the human ambassador finally broke the silence. Around him, the Galactic Council chamber glowed with projected casualty reports, numbers neatly categorized, planets reduced to percentages. Entire school districts erased under the phrase acceptable loss. No alarms. No outrage. Just procedure. You ruled it lawful, the ambassador said, his voice steady. You called it containment. The footage shifted. Children running through evacuation corridors that sealed shut. Planetary shields dropping seconds before orbital fire. Orders stamped, approved, archived. For 300 years, he continued, humanity obeyed your laws. We trusted your courts. We believed restraint would keep the peace. He placed a small data core onto the floor. It activated, revealing star systems the Council had never recorded. Never sanctioned. Never controlled. His eyes lifted, cold and unblinking. You killed our children. A pause heavy enough to bend the chamber. Now you will learn why humanity stayed quiet, and why that silence is over. The Galactic Council chamber was a cathedral of authority, vast and indifferent, its ceilings lost to shadow, its walls alive with flickering holographic records of 1,000 civilizations. Species from across the spiral arms crowded its tiers, some perched on stilts, some floating on anti-grav platforms, some wrapped in elaborate ceremonial robes, but all of them were bureaucrats first, representatives second. Morality, if it existed here, was subordinate to procedure, precedent, and stability. The session opened with the formal ratification of Containment Action Theta-7, the strike against 3 human frontier systems. The lead counselor spoke in clipped, measured tones, risk neutralization, preemptive enforcement, acceptable collateral thresholds. The word children never passed his lips. On the holographic feed above them, orbital bombardments descended on glowing human cities. Shields were shown dropping at precise moments, evacuation corridors sealed in perfect synchronization with orbital fire. Every number was neat. Every casualty was a percentage. Every destruction a line item. The human delegation remained calm. They did not shout. They did not issue threats. They did not call the council liars or murderers. Instead, they spoke with quiet authority, pointing to logs, timestamps, and shield control access codes that proved the council itself had approved, or directly caused, the failures. They requested arbitration under Article 12, which explicitly forbade targeting noncombatants, especially children. Their tone was firm, precise, unflinching. The council deliberated. Legal analysts cited precedent. To revisit the case, they argued, would destabilize enforcement authority across hundreds of systems. Emotion must never dictate law. Stability, they said, outweighed grief, outrage, and morality. One counselor even referred to the human casualties as demographic regret, as though the lives of children were statistical noise rather than a tragedy. The vote passed. Sanctions were reaffirmed. Humanity was officially punished, not for any act of aggression, but for attempting to correct the Council's record. Observers whispered among themselves, assuming the humans would now break, retaliate, or beg. They did none of those things. Instead, the human ambassador issued a quiet command, full archival transfer of all Council records concerning Theta-7, every log of destroyed shelters, every sealed evacuation corridor, every disabled planetary shield, sent to a secure human system under the codename Phase 1, confirmed. Nothing was deleted. Nothing was altered. Nothing was wasted. The chamber emptied, voices fading into procedural chatter. Across the galaxy, observers assumed the verdict had been delivered. Humanity had been disciplined. Humanity had been silenced. Humanity had been subdued. But inside the human archives, something else was being recorded. Every injustice. Every decision. Every oversight. Every omission. Everything the Council had considered final was now catalogued, cross-referenced, and preserved. The galaxy believed judgment had been given. Humanity knew judgment had only begun. The human worlds lay silent. Cities stood as empty skeletons, streets littered with echoes of footsteps that would never return. Schools were gone, not by accident but by deliberate design. The strike had been surgical, precise, and horrifying in its efficiency. Yet there was no screaming from the survivors, no calls for vengeance, no panic broadcasts across the void. Humanity did not collapse. Humanity did not retaliate. Humanity recorded. Entire sectors of the frontier became memorials. Citizens walked slowly through empty classrooms, touch-sensitive walls still glowing faintly from lessons that would never be completed. Parents stood over rubble, holding tablets with last-minute messages to children who would never read them. And across each world, ambassadors and civilians alike asked the same silent question: why are we not fighting? The galaxy's analysts, watching from observation satellites and council monitoring networks, reached a single conclusion: humans had been broken. They had accepted death quietly. They had swallowed loss without complaint. From this, the council concluded that the species could be managed, disciplined, even ignored. Pacified, they called it. Weak. Vulnerable. But within humanity's command archives, the truth was different. Every destroyed shelter, every sealed evacuation corridor, every moment when the Council had overruled safety protocols, every act of deliberate cruelty was catalogued, timestamped, and cross-referenced. The human response was methodical, grief was acknowledged, but restrained. Anger was measured, but stored. Loss was mourned, but weaponized as data. The silence itself became part of the plan. Reports of missing children, of cities reduced to ashes, were circulated in the galaxy's media as evidence of human compliance. Ambassadors and counselors interpreted this stillness as surrender. Entire fleets were redeployed elsewhere. Surveillance satellites were powered down. Humans were underestimated once more. In one hidden chamber on a moon orbiting a dead human colony, leaders of the Second Humanity observed the records. These were not the diplomats, the ambassadors, or the survivors. They were architects, engineers, and strategists who had spent generations preparing for this moment. They did not speak of vengeance. They spoke of inevitability. The galaxy, blinded by perceived weakness, had walked straight into a trap they could not yet see. And yet, despite the scale of loss, there was no chaos. No frenzied recruitment of mercenary fleets. No desperate appeals for aid. Every system remained orderly, every archive intact, every citizen accounted for. The message was clear: humanity had absorbed the strike, catalogued it, and done nothing, publicly. The chapter closes with a single transmission sent across human networks, encrypted and flagged as Phase 2, the line has been crossed. Innocence has been targeted. The galaxy will now understand the cost of misjudging us. The silence had lulled the Council into complacency. But it had also set the stage for something far larger than revenge, a lesson in restraint, intelligence, and the unshakable resolve of a species that refused to be underestimated. The galaxy thought humanity was broken. Humanity was preparing. For centuries, the galaxy believed humanity was a single, unified species, confined to a handful of frontier systems, governed by bureaucrats and diplomats, restrained by laws it did not create. They thought humans were fragile, predictable, and easily categorized. They were wrong. Behind the outwardly compliant civilization, humanity had split itself generations ago. The diplomats, the governors, the ambassadors, the humans the galaxy saw, were only half of the story. The other half had vanished, silently, deliberately. Entire fleets and colonies had disappeared from all registered star charts. Scientists, engineers, strategists, and soldiers had retreated to hidden systems, building infrastructure and capabilities the galaxy would never imagine. This hidden humanity was no reckless militia or rogue faction. They were architects of survival and precision. AI-driven logistics managed entire planetary networks, ensuring that no strike, no blockade, no espionage could catch them off guard. They had perfected cybernetic integration with starship systems, orbital defenses, and interstellar communications, technologies that, on the surface, appeared harmless but could immobilize entire sectors in minutes. The first humans the galaxy met had been restrained. They obeyed law and diplomacy, studied treaties, and cataloged casualties. But the hidden branch, what the Council would later call the other humanity, operated beyond legal boundaries. They were preparing for the day when restraint would no longer be enough. And now, that day had arrived. The initial strikes against human frontier worlds, the deaths of children, the deliberate failures of evacuation protocols, all of it became fuel. Not anger, not rage, not vengeance, but knowledge. Every act was meticulously recorded, every error, every intentional cruelty, every underestimation by alien species. These records were then cross-analyzed against the galaxy's own logistics, fleets, communication hubs, supply lines, governance protocols. Within weeks, the hidden humanity could predict every response the Council might attempt, every contingency the Council thought secret, every weakness the Council believed hidden. And yet, they waited. They did not strike immediately. They observed. They let the galaxy believe that humanity had been broken. They let the Council reassure itself that the species was diminished, disorganized, and powerless. Every report of destruction, every memorial broadcast, every Council vote of sanction was logged, indexed, and folded into strategic simulations. The galaxy, blind in arrogance, was lulled into complacency. In hidden orbital stations, humans monitored the Council's every move. Holodisplays showed entire sectors frozen in real time, trade hubs, fleet movements, planetary communications, all mapped, analyzed, and prepared for intervention. Even the most advanced alien warships could not hide their true positions from human sensors. The galaxy's overconfidence was now a weapon in itself. And yet, humanity had not yet revealed itself. Not the fleets, not the AI, not the orbital defenses. They were shadows, ghosts, whispers of a species the galaxy believed constrained. They did not need destruction to prove their supremacy. Strategy, patience, and moral clarity were their tools. The chapter closes with a single, deliberate thought circulating through hidden command nodes. The Council believed they judged us. They thought they decided the cost of human life. They were wrong. They cannot even imagine the scale of what waits. By the time the galaxy understood, the other humanity would already be everywhere, present in systems thought empty, and communications thought secure, and calculations thought secret. Humanity had been underestimated. Humanity had remained silent. Humanity had been preparing. And now, at last, the silence would end. Humanity had endured losses beyond measure. Systems reduced to rubble, billions of lives erased, countless acts of cruelty justified as procedure. Yet the galaxy still misread them. Humanity did not lash out. Humanity did not beg. Humanity simply recorded and prepared. But there was one line that could never be tolerated. One threshold that, if crossed, would demand a response beyond diplomacy, beyond law, beyond patience. That line was innocence. Specifically, the deliberate targeting of children. The strikes against the frontier worlds were precise, surgical, and intentional. Shields dropped at peak hours. Evacuation corridors sealed. Orphaned children, classrooms full of the youngest and most vulnerable, extinguished not as collateral damage, but as a calculated demonstration of authority. Inside hidden command stations, human leaders gathered. Strategists, ethicists, generals, and scientists convened. For centuries they had debated response protocols, red lines, and proportionality. Now those debates were concluded. The line had been crossed. There was no haste, no panic, no emotional hysteria. Decisions were deliberate, ethical, and unavoidable. Humanity's doctrine, refined over generations of observation and preparation, allowed war only when innocence was targeted. The strike on the children was both an atrocity and a signal. The galaxy had triggered the response. Plans were activated in silence. Not for destruction, not yet, but for exposure. The galaxy would see itself reflected in human precision, intelligence, and moral judgment. The hidden humanity, the architects of centuries-long contingency, began deploying systems never meant for war but for revelation. Entire sectors would feel the consequences of underestimating humanity without a single shot fired initially. The Council had assumed that fear could control humans, that bureaucracy could restrain them, that grief would subdue them. They were wrong. Humanity would act not on blind emotion, not on revenge, but on principle. Innocence had been violated, and now the galaxy itself would bear witness to the cost of that violation. In the orbital halls of the hidden colonies, young officers, human children born after the strikes, trained in simulations, logistics, and strategy. They were not soldiers of vengeance. They were guardians, witnesses, and executors of a doctrine written by their elders: protect the innocent. Punish those who target them. Do not be stopped by fear or precedent. Every planet that had observed human compliance would now begin to see cracks in that illusion. Supply chains would fail, trade routes would stall, fleets would hesitate, and communications would falter. Humanity's restraint had lulled the galaxy into a false security. The children's deaths had shattered it. The chapter closes with the human ambassador's private log, recorded but never transmitted. We do not strike because we desire destruction. We strike because the innocent were killed. We do not act on anger, but on principle. The galaxy must understand that the measure of a species is not in its compliance, but in what it does when innocence is violated. The line has been crossed. Our response will be inevitable, precise, and undeniable. They will not see it coming. They cannot escape it. The galaxy believed humanity was silent. Humanity had only been waiting for the line to be crossed. That line had been crossed. And now, the other side of humanity would awaken. The day began like any other in the Galactic Council chamber, with species arriving in their ceremonial tiers, holographic reports flickering to life, and votes on minor sanctions scheduled for approval. The Council believed it still held authority. It believed it had punished humanity. It believed the frontier systems had been broken. Then the transmissions began. At first, they were subtle. Trade relays went offline in distant sectors. Supply convoys slowed, then halted entirely. Fleets attempted maneuvers, only to find navigational systems scrambled by interference no known species could explain. Communications between Council worlds became intermittent, inconsistent, and at times, completely blocked. Analysts struggled to identify a source. Panic rippled across the chamber. The human ambassador rose. His voice, calm, deliberate, cut through the confusion. We warned you. We cataloged everything. You assumed compliance was weakness. It was preparation. Screens shifted to reveal something the Council had never expected: entire networks of human systems, previously hidden, now projected across star charts with complete control over galactic infrastructure. Trade routes, navigation grids, orbital defenses, every system was mapped, analyzed, and connected to human command protocols. Ships the Council believed functional were now effectively frozen. Fleets could not fire, warp, or communicate without human authorization. There was no massacre. No immediate violence. Yet fear spread faster than any weapon could travel. The galaxy realized, almost simultaneously, that humanity had been underestimated. The species they had considered broken was now omnipresent, precise, and uncontested in ways the Council could not counter. Council leaders attempted to assert control, issuing commands to fleets, activating emergency protocols, calling allies to their aid. Each attempt failed. Every calculation, every contingency, every security measure had been anticipated. Humanity had predicted it all. And all along, they had waited for the line to be crossed. The Council's own record-keeping was used against them. Systems the Council considered secure were suddenly under human observation. Communications meant to coordinate defense now revealed weaknesses to the hidden branch of humanity. Every secret the galaxy thought safe, every contingency, every assumed advantage, it was all exposed. Species that had voted for the destruction of human children found themselves isolated, their fleets immobilized, their supply lines cut. They could do nothing. The galaxy could do nothing. Humanity had not unleashed weapons. Humanity had not fired a single shot. They had only activated the architecture of control they had been quietly building for centuries. Across the chamber, species whispered in disbelief, some trembling. What had once been law, procedure, and authority now felt like vulnerability. Every council member understood, in that instant, the scope of human preparation, intelligence, patience, strategy, and moral clarity wielded as effectively as any fleet or superweapon. And then the message arrived, projected in a voice that was calm, collective, and chillingly precise. You believed you could decide our fate. You chose to target innocence. You misjudged us. You will now see the consequences, not through fear, not through anger, but through the certainty that comes when a species acts without error, without hesitation, and without compromise. The chamber descended into chaos. Counselors shouted, some fainted, some attempted to flee to hidden chambers. Communications were overwhelmed. Analysts frantically tried to trace the source. Yet everywhere they looked, they found only the shadow of humanity, systems hidden for centuries, now revealed, now in control. By the end of the day, the council no longer ruled. They had not been destroyed. They had not even been threatened with violence. They had been exposed. Humanity had assumed the moral, intellectual, and strategic high ground in a single, flawless operation. The galaxy would never again mistake human restraint for weakness. The day the Council lost control was not marked by fire or blood, but by the chilling clarity of human superiority and the first tremors of a species that had waited, silently, for the right moment to act. The galaxy had already begun to panic. Council fleets were immobilized. Trade hubs were paralyzed. Communications were collapsing. And yet, nothing had fired a shot. Nothing had detonated. Humanity's restraint had only deepened the fear. Then they arrived. Not in the form of fleets screaming across star lanes, not in the thunder of weapons or firestorms. The other humanity did not announce itself with destruction. It arrived as inevitability. Systems once thought empty now shimmered with human presence. Entire sectors flickered online, revealed as nodes in a network of precision that spanned light years. Civilian communication channels reopened, but only to display calculated projections of galactic vulnerability. Supply chains moved flawlessly, yet every fleet that attempted coordination without authorization stalled mid-warp. The Council stared, helpless, at the revelation: humanity had been everywhere and nowhere for centuries. While diplomats argued and bureaucrats judged, humans had quietly constructed a network of influence, strategy, and control no other species could comprehend. Every defensive grid, every communication line, every warp corridor, each had been anticipated, integrated, and made responsive to human command. And then came the first message. Not shouted, not threatening, but resonant, calm, and precise. You feared extinction. We feared becoming you. The message carried weight beyond words. Every species and every sector understood instantly, this was not just retaliation. This was moral and intellectual supremacy made manifest. Humans had waited, planned, and observed. The Council's decisions, its votes, its strikes against children, all had been recorded. All had been calculated. All had been woven into a response that was inevitable, precise, and devastatingly efficient. From hidden stations orbiting dead colonies, strategists monitored the impact. Ships that once roamed freely now froze in orbit, unable to move without human authorization. Planets rich in resources found themselves locked behind digital barricades they could not penetrate. Communications meant to coordinate resistance now only transmitted human-controlled simulations. No one could outmaneuver humanity, no fleet could escape the systems they had never suspected existed. Yet, at no point did humans fire a weapon. The galaxy realized, almost simultaneously, that the other humanity's power was in knowledge, precision, and moral authority. Every species that had thought themselves safe, every council member who had approved strikes against children, now understood the scale of their miscalculation. They had underestimated not strength, but calculation, not numbers, but principle, not reaction, but preparation. And everywhere the other humanity was present, humanity's calm voice carried across the void. You assumed restraint meant weakness. You assumed patience meant fear. You assumed morality could be ignored. We have done nothing, until now. In orbital halls, hidden command nodes, and integrated planetary systems, the other humanity observed the galaxy as a chessboard. Each move the Council had made, each decision to kill, each policy of cruelty, they had been anticipated. Each species' likely response was mapped, calculated, and neutralized before it could be attempted. For the first time in millennia, the Council experienced true fear. Not fear of destruction, not fear of war, but fear of inevitability. The species they had mocked, targeted, and dismissed had not only survived, they had built a network, a doctrine, and a presence that no one could challenge. The chapter closes with a single, chilling realization reverberating across every species: humanity was not only alive. Humanity was everywhere. Humanity was precise. Humanity was patient. And humanity had decided, finally, that the line they would no longer tolerate, the line crossed with the murder of children, would be enforced. The galaxy would never again underestimate the other side of humanity. The Council had lost control. The fleets were frozen. Trade routes were paralyzed. Communications faltered. Every system that had approved, facilitated, or ignored the strikes against human children now faced the inescapable weight of human judgment. But this was not a war. It was a reckoning. From orbiting command stations, human strategists observed the offending species. They did not fire weapons. They did not deploy fleets. Instead, they used what the galaxy had never anticipated: law as power, intelligence as leverage, and moral precision as a weapon. Every violation, every decision to target civilians, every deliberate oversight was documented and cross-referenced against the Council's own legal codes. The Council had long claimed impartiality, but humans now demonstrated the truth: their power could enforce accountability far beyond rhetoric or treaties. Ambassadors who had once dismissed humanity's appeals were confronted with irrefutable evidence. Their fleets could not move. Their communications were stripped of obfuscation. Their trade networks failed. And every citizen, soldier, and official now had access to the record of their crimes. The galaxy realized that humanity's justice was not arbitrary, it was flawless. Every sanction, every punishment, every consequence was exact, proportional, and inevitable. Species responsible for targeting children faced the most immediate consequences. Leaders were publicly isolated, their crimes broadcast across every system, their own population seeing, for the first time, the truth of their decisions. Civil uprisings erupted, not instigated by humans, but by citizens finally empowered with knowledge. Entire governments collapsed under the weight of exposure, not fire. The message was clear: the universe will no longer tolerate attacks on the innocent. Even the Council itself was stripped of authority. Its members were forced to revise every law, treaty, and precedent in light of humanity's doctrine. Decisions that had been considered untouchable were now reversed. Every species that had assumed superiority discovered that intelligence, patience, and moral clarity could wield more power than fleets or weapons ever could. Humans did not gloat. They did not celebrate. Their actions were surgical, precise, and, most importantly, absolute. The galaxy was not destroyed, it was corrected. The punishment was visible, immediate, and permanent. The moral order had shifted. Those who had violated the line were accountable, and the galaxy understood, viscerally and intellectually, that humanity had defined that line, and would enforce it with certainty. By the chapter's end, the offending species were weakened, isolated, and irrevocably humbled. Council authority was no longer unquestioned. Alien militaries no longer assumed they could challenge human strategy. And everywhere, observers, the neutral species, the undecided worlds, recognized a new reality: humanity was no longer underestimated, no longer restrained, and no longer bound by patience alone. The chapter closes with a single, chilling directive from the human ambassador. We do not strike because we desire war. We enforce because we value innocence. You chose to violate it. You will now live with the certainty that every violation of that principle will meet the same precision, the same inevitability, and the same unflinching moral clarity. The galaxy has learned. The lesson is irreversible. Humanity had judged without mercy. Not with fire or death, but with knowledge, strategy, and principle. The galaxy would never forget the day that restraint became supremacy. The galaxy breathed differently now. Authority had shifted, not with weapons, not with conquest, but with clarity. The species that had once ruled through bureaucracy, intimidation, and fleets discovered that human restraint had been the true measure of power. Council halls, once brimming with pomp and procedure, were silent. Many worlds dissolved their previous alliances, fearful of overreach, fearful of misjudging humanity again. Trade networks, communications grids, and fleet coordination hubs now operated with humans as guarantors, monitors, and arbiters. Not rulers, but overseers, the galaxy understood that order under humanity was not oppression, but stability enforced through principle. Species that had attempted to target human children now faced generations of accountability. Leaders were replaced. Policies were rewritten. Citizens of once dominant empires learned for the first time that the universe judged differently than they had assumed, not by force alone, not by fear, but by restraint, intelligence, and moral resolve. Even neutral worlds observed quietly, absorbing the lesson. Humanity had demonstrated a doctrine that no species had mastered, the ability to act decisively while maintaining moral authority, the power to enforce consequences without indiscriminate destruction, and the patience to wait until the moment demanded action. The hidden branch, the other humanity, remained in orbit, in networks, and communication systems. Their presence was invisible but undeniable. Fleets moved freely only with human permission, resources flowed only through human channels, and security grids operated under human control. No one dared challenge it. The galaxy realized that supremacy did not belong to the loudest or the strongest, it belonged to the patient, the precise, the principled. The chapter closes with a quiet, resonant thought echoing across every species: humanity had not sought dominance. Humanity had sought principle. And now, the galaxy had no choice but to respect it. The lesson was permanent. The order was irreversible. And in the silence that followed, one fact became unmistakable: the species that had been underestimated, restrained, and dismissed had reshaped the galaxy, not with weapons or fear, but with intelligence, strategy, and moral certainty. The line had been drawn, and all species understood that crossing it again would carry consequences far beyond comprehension. Humanity had won. The galaxy had learned. And nothing would ever be the same. Centuries passed, but the lesson endured. Across every system, every planet, every star lane, the story of humanity's restraint and precision became legend, not as myth, not as propaganda, but as unshakable truth. Civilizations that once wielded fleets with impunity now taught their children the same lesson humanity had enforced: the innocent must never be targeted, and the calculated hand of justice can be swifter than any weapon. Humanity withdrew once again into its own systems, observing, recording, and quietly ensuring the galaxy remained within the boundaries it had defined. They did not rule through fear. They did not dictate through armies. They existed as a presence that no species could ignore, a standard that no council could erase. The other humanity continued to operate in shadow, a network of intelligence and precision that spanned light years, prepared for any threat to principle, yet unseen, yet inevitable. Yet humanity never forgot the cost. Every memorial, every record of the lost children, every archive of injustice was preserved. These were not reminders of grief, but of resolve. The galaxy was now under observation, not oppression, its laws enforced not by coercion, but by certainty. Every species knew, deeply and viscerally, that crossing the line would not result in chaos, but in the unyielding and inevitable application of justice. And in every corner of the universe, a single message remained embedded in permanent galactic archives, unalterable, unambiguous. You killed our children. We showed you mercy. Do not ask us to teach you the other lesson. It was not a threat. It was a statement of principle. Humanity had demonstrated that restraint, patience, and intelligence were the truest forms of strength. They had been underestimated, dismissed, and tested, and the galaxy had learned that the measure of a species is not in its firepower, nor in its fleets, but in the clarity of its resolve and the morality of its actions. In this new era, species that had once sought dominance recalibrated their strategies. The galactic order had shifted irreversibly. Humanity's victory was not measured in planets conquered or fleets destroyed, but in the unbroken moral and strategic authority it now held. And throughout all this, humanity remained vigilant, silent, and omnipresent. The stars themselves seemed to carry the lesson: underestimated once, humanity would not be underestimated again. The galaxy's architects of war, law, and diplomacy understood that the other humanity had taught them something permanent: patience is power, restraint is supremacy, and crossing the line against the innocent is a calculation a species may never live to reverse. Humanity had acted. The galaxy had witnessed. And the universe had learned the most fundamental truth of all. Never underestimate what humanity can endure, and never doubt what it will do when the innocent are threatened.